I hope not.
Make arrangements.
Oh,
Yum. Thank you.
where the kitty boy?
My glasses fog up.
It's busier than being at work.
Right.
It is. No, both sets of
I know that
grandparents
feeling.
are out of commission, so. It's a rat
You
race.
go to work, you're like,
Today is the
I can focus on
27th,
one
right?
thing.
For
I'm like,
26th.
I'm like working from home. It's not my favorite. That's why I'm like, can
Yeah.
you guys make it work?
It's, yeah, like,
So,
full-
so we have to
Yeah,
make sure we
the-
let the public know that we're saving them money on their taxes,
Oh,
unlike
Hello?
the village board.
He doesn't know. Can't recall. Correct. Yep. And he does a lot of.
No, I think it's important that they know,
like
though.
that, so I mean, who knows? He probably got nicked somewhere. Yep. So.
are your parents
Yeah.
okay?
What's that?
Are your parents okay?
No, they're quarantining. And then
Oh,
Aaron, well, her dad has really bad cellulitis.
Oh,
So he was in the emergency room yesterday.
oh my
So it's
goodness.
like both sets of parents are out of the game, and
That's
it's
so
like
hard.
both
Hey,
kids,
Thor.
both kids had off. Franklin had off today. So if it's a school day, it's easy, you know. You take them and
Yeah.
on. It's like nope, of course.
All
okay.
mics are on, and we are actually live currently. Just need to check this one because
Good, how are you?
yep, we're good.
Come on.
Did you get in?
Give these to you now. Oh, thanks. Like, what do they call it? A shot duster? But I didn't have, I don't have a cold. And I didn't wear it cold to school today, so I was freezing. I was just freezing. So cold out. It was like in the 30s. It's hard. I mean, we're doing virtual, and I'm doing virtual meetings in person, so it's going to be pretty fun.
Yep.
We have a patient that I don't want to they don't make a real fun of it. Like, from fully virtual to separately meetings plus a hybrid. But they're, I think, so their dog is fully does not.
district received final figures for the revenue limit last week. A larger increase in state aid, 14.18%, than projected, which was 6.4%, was received. Overall, it is an increase of $2,162,378 of state aid from last year. In addition to state aid, other items that will impact the tax levy and mill rate in a positive direction include voucher payments were lower than budgeted. The voucher payments actually decreased this year by $14,000, and since it is lower than the amount budgeted, the district will be able to lower the tax levy by $60,000 from the initial projection. Property valuation increased by 4%, which lowers the overall mill rate. The actual tax decrease for each community member will vary based on how the assessed value changes. You will hear more about that in the board report this evening.
Kim, what did you say it was going to lower by?
It's going to lower the tax levy by $60,000 for the voucher, the change in vouchers when we had actuals. The Department of Public Instruction is offering an application for waiver from a list of statutory requirements based on COVID. An application for waiver requires a public hearing and board action. A district can apply for waiver any time during the school year when it is determined that the district will have difficulty meeting the requirements as a result of COVID impact. Greendale is planning to request a waiver from the requirements of educator effectiveness and will hold a public hearing next week. Greendale may consider applying for waiver for hours of instruction, among other possibilities. However, at this time we're anticipating being able to meet our statutory requirements given the nature and support of virtual instruction. Over the last 2 weeks, Greendale has seen a steep increase in active COVID cases in the community. The schools continue to monitor the impact of community spread on our in-person learning environments. At this time, we have had several unrelated positive cases among students and staff. When the school is notified of a positive case, the school nurse works with the building administration to identify close contacts during the infectious period. This means that they are within 6 feet for 15 minutes over the course of the day, starting 2 days prior to the positive case, experiencing symptoms or testing positive with no symptoms. The school nurse or another medical professional calls all close contacts. Then a letter is sent to the staff and the school community in which there was a positive case. If a learning group is quarantined and moved virtual, or a staff member is out and requires a substitute, this information is provided to the community on the dashboard. The community positivity rate and case burden are important for the schools and families to monitor, but decisions to move a school virtual will be based on the 5 criteria established in August, which includes classes quarantined, contact tracing time, ability to staff in-person learning, availability of PPE, and overall in-person attendance. Thresholds and current status can be seen on the district website. We are working hard to maintain transparency and protect student and staff safety while also maintaining health confidentiality for positive cases. The 2021 niche rankings of state school districts were posted earlier this month. Greendale schools ranked 6th in the state overall, as well as ranking number 1 for best teachers and number 1 for best places to teach. Each individual school is ranked in the top of its category in the area. Niche rankings are based on data from a variety of state and federal sources, as well as public reviews of the district. Congratulations to our staff and the community. The Welcoming Diversity Education Team held a virtual event on October 15th featuring Reggie Jackson. Approximately 150 community members registered and attended the online event. The schools are working to get rights to share the recorded event for a period of 2 weeks for those who could not attend. The learning focused on the history of housing laws and the current diversity statistics in Greendale. We expect to be able to share a link to the recording for those who missed it during the next week or so, and we'll promote registration by website and social media once rights are secured. With our athletic teams, 3 girls tennis players qualified for state. 2 girls cross-country runners have advanced to the sectionals. Girls swim is still in season as they approach the Woodland Conference meet this coming weekend. Boys volleyball played in their WIA regional on Friday, and girls volleyball lost on Thursday to Oak Creek in the WIAA regional semifinals. Currently, the Woodland Conference was discussing which winter sports to play, what mitigation strategies need to be in place for COVID spread, and how schedules need to be set based on participation and agreements on mitigation. Mrs. Amidzic, that would be me, and Mr. Galante will be meeting with the Woodland Conference leaders over the next week and a half to come to a decision, and we will keep the board and the community posted. The Welcoming Diversity Steering Team will hold a virtual meeting on Thursday, October 29th. The first quarter will end on Friday, October 30th, which is important for our middle school transitioning their elective classes. And the board self-evaluation has been shared. Board members are asked to complete the survey within the next couple of weeks. And finally, donations. We'd like to thank the following people for their donations. $3,000 was received from Blue Yonder, care of Devin Sanchez of Scottsdale, Arizona, to the GHS Robotics Club. And $5,000 was received from Gilbert Bannock of Greendale to the marching band in honor of his many grandchildren who have been part of the program over the past 20 years. So thank you for those generous donations. Yes. It's the new microphones that are a problem.
Move them closer to your faces for now. We'll check out later.
Comments. Opportunities. Limit to citizen comments. And tonight we'll be adhering to that policy in a time limit at tonight's meeting. Persons wishing to address the board are asked to come to the microphone at this middle, state their name and address for the record, and comments are limited to only one time with a limit of 3 minutes. Citizen comments are limited to a period not to exceed 30 minutes. With that, I'll invite you to the microphone.
My name is John Bergner. My address is 8501 Parkland Drive. That's in Franklin. And I'm here to put a request in. I had my father, Richard Bergner, was a teacher here in Greendale from 1947 to 1985 for 38 years. He taught mostly at the Greendale Intermediate School. He was originally one of the first head football coaches the first 6 years of Greendale. He is recognized, for all his service, not for really being a physical education teacher and a coach, but for being just a role model to most of his students. And we run into many kids that are ex-students, and they would range in age right now between 45 and 85. So I'm coming in. I would like to put a request in to see if the school would consider naming the Greendale Gymnasium at Intermediate in the name of my father, Richard Bergner. And I brought in some information to give you, and I think if you could put it on an agenda, and consider it, I would, my family would welcome that.
Thank you, and congratulations to your father for his years at the Greendale School District. You can share that with Mary Ann Jacobson, and then she'll make sure that it's shared amongst the board.
Yeah, even the board allowed us in 2008. His funeral was at Greendale Intermediate School Gymnasium.
All right.
So, thank you all.
I can follow up
Thank
with
you.
board policy.
Yeah, we'll have our school administration follow up. to you based on board policy. And thank you again for your father's years of service.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, seeing no additional comments, we'll continue on with the agenda. First item on the agenda is the regular board meeting minutes from our last board meeting. Any questions or comments, or I'm looking for a motion to approve?
I move approval of the regular meeting minutes of October 5th as it outlined in agenda item 1.1.
I second.
There's been a motion and a second to approve the board meeting minutes of October 5th. Any further discussion? Then I call for a roll call vote, starting with you, Kim.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
And I am yes, motion carries. Next item on the agenda is our monthly financial report.
So included in your board packets are financials for the months of August and September. August revenues were 0.47%. That compares similarly to the prior year, which was 0.76%. In September, 7.38% of budgeted revenues. That compares with 7.23% in the prior year. On the expenditure side, the numbers were very similar year over year. August, the expenses were 6.37, and that compares with 6.54 in the prior year. And then the month of September, 13.88% of budgeted expenses through September 30th. That compares with 13.41% in the 19-20 school year. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions regarding tonight's financial report? All right, then I'm looking for a motion to approve the checks and disbursements from this month.
I move to approve checks in the amount of $5,931,556.29. Disbursements in the amount of $3,175,676.44 for a total amount of checks and disbursements in the amount of $9,107,232.73 as outlined in agenda item 2.2.
I second.
There's been a motion and a second to approve the checks and disbursements totaling $9,107,232.73. Any further discussion? Then I call for a roll call vote. Kim?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
And I am yes. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda are approval of policies. So there were a number of policies that we reviewed and discussed at our last board meeting, and they are being brought back at tonight's meeting for its second reading and approval. So anything Kim or the policy committee wants to highlight?
I don't believe there are any significant changes that we discussed at the last meeting, so these are consistent with what was brought forward for a first reading on October 5th.
Any questions or comments?
I just had one comment, and I'm not certain. I'm trying to figure out which policy it is. It just said something about the board president, like ad hoc committees that you would appoint, but we don't really do that. So I don't know which policy that was in. I thought it was 151 or maybe it was 161.
We do not have standing committees, but there have been committees established by the board that are subject to posting on open meetings. For example, our facility review committee was a committee that was brought together by the board.
Okay. So that's the type of committees it's referring to?
Correct. So it's important to have that in policy so
Okay.
that when we form committees of the from the board, that we are following procedure.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. If there are no other questions, then I'm looking for a motion to approve the policies as outlined in agenda item 4.1.
Move to approve the policies outlined in agenda 4.1, which are policies 131, 142, 143, 150, 151, 161, 164, and 181.
I second.
There's been a motion and a second to approve board policies as outlined in agenda item 4.1. Any additional conversation? Then I call for a roll call vote, starting with Kim.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Next item on the agenda, so part of the reason why we're meeting at the fourth Monday tonight is to approve the budget and certify the 2021 tax collector.
Thank you. And if I can get some assistance, I can project up a couple of slides to kind of summarize the notes on this. So certainly very grateful to our community members and district staff that have supported us through our budgetary refinement process and to get here this evening. So our district budget team, a number of teaching staff members, paraprofessionals, custodial staff representatives, and others that have helped us throughout the last 6 months or so. We came together as a team in the April timeframe when we saw there could be a significant change to state level revenues and understanding that that could have significant impact on our budget as we plan for the 2020-21 school year, as well as a citizen finance team who have been helping me in my first year in the district and helping us to talk through the alignment of resources and how we're doing that in a way that best reflects some of those community expectations to continue high quality programming throughout the school district. Kim had mentioned a number of areas where we saw changes in the final numbers for the 2020-21 school year. Our voucher payments coming in lower than what was budgeted. Property valuation increased by 4.01%. Our third Friday numbers we received at the end of September, and that was calculated over a 3-year average for inclusion in our revenue limit. So our number came to 2,496 in that 3-year average. Total tax levy that we're proposing here this evening is $15,670,083. That's a decrease of 2.1% from the prior year. The total mill rate decrease would go from $11.17 to $10.51. We identified within that tax levy, we would allocate an additional $150,000 than what was presented at the annual meeting towards the community service fund. That community service fund decreased by $159,336 last year, and we project additional losses for the 2020-21 school year. We anticipate that that additional levy to Fund 80 would be on a non-recurring basis and would allow us to sustain programming through the pandemic. As you're aware, with our community service fund, we've done a lot since March, starting off with emergency childcare for emergency workers within our school community, and we've continued to provide programming as possible to families. But there were significant revenue losses when we look at childcare in the spring for our other families where there were revenues that were lost to that programming. But we've made sure that that's continued to be a resource when it's safe to provide programming and continue to engage our community. Our Fund 39 referendum debt service tax levy is increasing by $585,119 from the annual meeting. $500,000 of that increase would be set aside for managing our debt service tax levy in future years. So being able to keep some sustainability that we don't see an ebb and flow from year to year, that the board has options going forward to manage that, to keep it stable. So those are dollars that won't be committed and can be decided into future years. And then again, as I mentioned, work's been done with that citizen finance team and district budget team to really think about the prioritization of resources. We identified the ability to realign expenses for $1.1 million. Some of those commitments include our cost reductions around our Fund 41 capital projects that we're realigning about $200,000 in those funds. We have reduced band bus transportation because our marching band has not participated in competitions this year. We suspended the nurse practitioner that we have in the district. We've realigned our open enrollment costs. We've reduced technology costs by implementing fiber line to the school district. We have realigned the prepayment of debt that was to fund 38. So in the prior year, we had a $400,000 prepayment of debt for the 2020-21 school year. We received direction from the board, since there are 6 years of payments left, to make sure that those dollars that were prepaid would not create a cliff in future years. So we've identified a third of that $400,000 to be utilized for current year programming, and that leaves $267,000 to be held that we can then have available as a backstop if there were to be significant additional costs this year, or if there were to be a state revenue readjustment and a cut to school aids for us after the board were to approve this tax levy. We are aligning $150,000 of our CARES Act funding. The district will receive 75% of those allocated in April. So there was $300,000 total allocated to the district. 25% will go to private schools. There are 2 within the school district boundaries that will receive $75,000. The other $225,000 will go to the district. We're realigning $150,000 of that and holding $75,000 for the 21-22 school year for ongoing expenses that we'll have in recovering from the pandemic. We're making cuts to building budget and district supply budgets, tuition reimbursement account, and vehicle replacement budgets to put those on hold. The final item that we did to ensure that we could realign enough expenditures to meet the $1.1 million deficit was we took a partial reduction in salary increases for this year. So we were able to keep about 75% of what we had originally allocated, or $446,000. Direction from the board was to try and maintain salary increases and manage benefits as they were, as well as provide a source of dollars if we receive additional cuts to the budget. And we believe that we've been able to walk the line in what's approved here, and also not committing beyond what we believe we can do with the increased costs that we had this year to provide hybrid learning. So that's my verbal summary of the slides I was going to show. Any questions from the board?
The full information is also in the board packet. So what he was sharing that is in the presentation and will be posted online for those who need to see it, that it will be bigger versions of what's in that written report.
I have a question about last year when the taxes came out. We had projected that we were going to have a mill rate of, I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was actually a little bit more because there was TIF money in there. Are we expecting anything like that this year? And can you explain how that TIF money affects the mill rate a little bit?
Yep. So the TIF tax levy is going to represent the amount to pay the ongoing debt for those upgrades that are made through the TIF. The total amount gets divided up amongst all the taxing jurisdictions. So the district will get a large portion of that. The school district will get a large portion of that added onto the line that everyone sees on their tax bill. That isn't directly the school district assessing costs for instruction within the buildings, but it is a reflection of the taxing authority for the TIF itself. And so last year, that information did come out after the school board set the tax levy and was added on to the 11% increase the district made. So there were questions that the school district received, confused about why there was an 11% increase, and then when it was placed on the tax bill, it showed as 15%. And it does have to reflect those dollars that the village adds on for TIF-related purposes. And talking with the village manager, that information will be known at the end of October or early November. So as of today, we had not received the final numbers of what the new property valuations will be across the village, and that will drive how the TIF gets allocated this year. There was a larger distribution last year to that area, and that's why we saw a significant increase in that portion of the budget. It still does not connect to what we are levying for instructional purposes, but it's also outside the board's ability to be able to control that amount. It'll just be a reflection of what the final number comes in at the village level.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
So the debt that's being addressed is the debt that was assessed for OPEB benefits and financed in the early 2000s. So there are 6 years left on that debt. And Jonathan will share how much is actually left to be paid.
Yes, I'll have to look up the exact principal amount, but we're expecting about $400,000 in payments for 6 years. So you're at about a $2 million amount that's owed at this point. And in terms of that cliff, the board prepaid $800,000 of that, which essentially was two years of payments, close to 2 years of payments with interest. And so creating the cliff is only utilizing 1/6 of that $800,000 each of 6 years to avoid creating that cliff later on.
I think for me, the important numbers are our state aid is increasing this year by about $2 million, and that's a reflection of our current spending, our total enrollment, and property values. Our tax levy is down by about 2%, so overall it's about $15.6 million tax levy. So that's the amount that we're getting from local property taxes, and that is down by about 2%. And then our mill rate overall is going from 11.17 to 10.51. So I think those are the key numbers for me. And I think at our last board meeting when you shared some of this information, I thank you and the team, both our community as well as our staff, for being proactive and coming up with some ideas as to what we could be doing in advance, knowing that there will be some financial challenges. So thank you again for working on that, so that by this meeting in October we have that listing and can execute on some of those items.
Yes, that's correct. Is overall there is a reduction in the tax levy and the instructional costs being levied for the schools.
Thank you, Jonathan. You've done, really appreciate all the work you put into this, and I'll echo a lot of what Joe said.
We've got a good team. Thank you.
All right, so any other questions? Otherwise, we're looking for two motions, one to approve the 2020-2021 budget, and second to certify the tax levy for the 2020-2021 fiscal year.
I make a motion to approve the final budget as presented in agenda item 4.2.
I second.
Is there a motion and second to approve the final budget as presented? Any further discussion? Can I call for a roll call vote?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
And I am a yes. Motion carries. And then the second motion needed is approval of the tax levy in the amount of $15,670,000 and $670,000. Let me say again, $15,670,083.
Make a motion to approve tax levy in the amount of $15,670,083.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second to approve the tax levy as outlined in agenda item 4.2. Any further discussion?
One comment. I know you updated the PDF, but I think it's still linked to the old version, which has two, on the mill rate percent change. Those two things are still incorrect on the one that's linked to the board book.
Okay. We'll make that change. Thank you.
Any additional discussion? I call for a roll call vote.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
And I am yes. Motion carries. Thank you again, Jonathan and Kim and team.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda, and this is kind of related to our budget, is the 2020-2021 resident enrollment update.
Yes. Do you have a working microphone? Good. Okay. The enrollment report is based on counts on third Friday, and this year we had some significant events going on in the world that had the potential to impact our enrollments. In the current environment, parents now have greater power in the market to shop for schools that meet the needs of their children, and we have for many years talked about Greendale being a district of destination. So when parents are out looking in the market, they're choosing homes in Greendale so that they can bring their children to our schools. And we have a sizable number of open enrollment applications every year for a limited number of open enrollment seats. And so with parents in the driver's seat for making those choices, it's important that we continue to be competitive in the market. And Greendale has been competitive. As you look at our enrollment numbers this year, many districts lost what is referred to as market share by families making choices to go to private schools because of how the return to learning was looking in each school district. And overall, we retained many of our students and are in a good position. And so while you'll see some reductions in enrollments, it's a minimal reduction, and we can talk through some of the things that we are researching to see if we can attract students to return who may have made other choices this fall. So with that, I'll let Julie walk through our enrollments. Sure, and I'll also just clarify that Jonathan shared our pupil count numbers for FTE purposes, and those do not match the third Friday count because that's a rolling 3-year average and includes summer school and other FTE calculations, different than the numbers that you see in this report. This report specifically focuses on resident enrollment and our third Friday counts. As Kim mentioned, we have had some transitions since the third Friday count was made, with the addition of 15 new residents joining the district since third Friday. So you'll see that we are down 72 students from last year. That has actually been reduced a little bit with additional enrollments since third Friday. That's just one point in time that we measure.
And was that additional 15 students, were those students or families coming into the district, or were they already here and were making different choices?
They were not attending Greendale schools, so I'm not sure if they were new move-ins or if they changed their choices at that time, but they were not in Greendale schools prior to September 18th when that third Friday count was taken. And a couple of them were students who had open enrolled to another district and chose to return to us.
Thank you.
So you said it was after the third Friday count, so do we receive funding for those students then or not?
No, we do. There's a January count, pupil count as well that encompasses some of those changes, but it's not full funding at that point.
Okay, all right.
Open enrollment seats, we have 218 open enrollment students. The board actually approved more seats than that, 229, but we were only able to fill to 218 of those. Some of that is transition that naturally occurs, people moving in or out of the area, moving into Greendale and becoming residents instead of open enrollment. And we do track that through the summer. Obviously, this year we were focusing on reopening schools also, but that is something that we look at, and I think that the pandemic probably impacted some of those family choices as well, if they were going to send their students to Greendale or stay in their resident district.
Another impact this year that was different than previous years is that because of the pandemic, they extended application period by a month, and our initial seat offers weren't able to go out till July instead of normally June. And so if a student had already made a commitment or paid a private school tuition, then they reject it, and we had less time to go back and offer that open seat to people on the waiting list because of the condensed timeline by delaying the open enrollment application closing period. So that impacted our ability to continue to go to our wait list.
Was there any thought given to doing open enrollment just for virtual seats here in Greendale?
The board did not declare those seats because we would have had to declare those seats at some point. And so at the time that we would have needed to declare those seats, we did not have enough information on how we were going to staff and return to learning because we did not have our resident requests. So we did do some of that this summer. We did open seats in July based on what we knew about returning to learning. But we weren't able to offer a plethora of them. In the future, we may be able to offer that in future years.
One of the other areas that I'll highlight is our time for learning enrollment. We are down 21 students in time for learning. We did not offer the virtual option for our 4K learners, so that may have impacted the numbers there, but we are down in our time for learning program. At the other grade levels, there's also some differences between projections to what our actual counts were. When I looked at the 15 students and where they were added since these Third Friday counts, it was pretty evenly across the board. It was 1 or 2 students per grade level almost. So there wasn't a specific grade area or grade span that we saw the biggest increase. The resident open enrollment out, choosing to attend other schools, we actually have 5 fewer Greendale residents that are selecting out than we did last year. When I reported to you in September of last year, we had 77 students that were out. By the end of the school year, we were at 89 students that were open enrolling out of Greendale schools. So that number did increase pretty significantly through the school year. This year, starting the year, we have 84 of them that are enrolling out. The next page of the report shows a little bit of history on what districts those students are choosing to attend. And one of the things that we've looked at in past years under different circumstances was schools that were offering a virtual option prior to pandemic times. So we haven't seen a significant increase in that particular area. Given that we were offering a virtual option this year, that probably affected that. That some families that may have otherwise chosen to open enroll out did that. The other interesting piece with this year is that we don't have any students attending through the Chapter 220 program. So that program is being phased out, but in past years we have seen students that were attending under Chapter 220 continuing, and this year that is not the case. There were 3 students last year, and all of them have now returned to Greendale schools.
And that phase-out was implemented at the state level?
Correct, yes. Yes, and we actually used to approve Chapter 220 and open enrollment seats for here in Greendale, but then that state-level program changes affected that.
Do we know why some of the students are opting out of Greendale? Do we have data on that?
Yeah, so I took a look at those students who are requesting open enrollment out for the first time this school year, and there was a sizable number that were requesting virtual schools out because the open enrollment period of request is March through May typically, but this year it went through June. And given all of the unknowns about how we would be reopening, there were several families with 2 or 3 students who were requesting open enrollment out to districts that had virtual programs established. And we actually had more than that, but as we talked with families, we said we'll be offering a virtual option, and some chose to stay with us and use the virtual option here in Greendale schools. Some families, in talking with them, they were concerned about the volatility of our online program, that it might not be available all year, and wanted to have the stability of an established online program, and so they enrolled their children in some of those outs. So that accounted for about a third.
The McFarland numbers, are those virtual?
Those are virtual.
Okay. So that's a...
And it represents only 2 families.
Okay.
What about the Milwaukee numbers?
The Milwaukee numbers, there's not many new Milwaukee numbers, but Milwaukee changed their practice around open enrollment and capitalized on the middle of the year open enrollment. There is a timeline for taking open enrollment seats, but there is an alternative open enrollment application that can be done anytime throughout the school year, and you can be accepted based on space available. Greendale typically does not have mid-year space available, and so that alternative application is rarely used. Milwaukee changed their strategy about 3 years ago, and when families were leaving, they handed them an alternative open enrollment application and automatically accepted them into a seat so that they could continue in Milwaukee where they had been attending already. So many times the Milwaukee open enrollment that we're seeing that's new are students who have never been in our schools. They're moving into our district from Milwaukee and choosing to stay at their school because they had been satisfied and because Milwaukee was offering them an opportunity to stay long term.
Okay, thank you.
We've been calling and recruiting and working on that, but there are, that is a space where we saw a change in Milwaukee's behavior, which then we saw a change in families choosing to stay in their Milwaukee school when they moved into residency in Greendale.
Were there any feedback where people said they opted out because they weren't happy with the school district?
I did not receive that comment when I was investigating some of our open enrollment out.
Okay, good.
The other one that seemed to grow was Waukesha.
They have an IQ Academy, which is an online school.
Okay, so it was online.
With the Milwaukee, just going back to that, do we keep track of the schools they're going to? Are these specialty schools, or do we have any idea what they're offering?
We have that data. I don't have it broken out here, but we do have access to it. I know when we looked at it pretty closely about 2 years ago, it was what Kim described of they were attending a Milwaukee public school and moved into Greendale, but continued usually at the elementary level, continued at the school that they had started at.
Okay.
Because they had friends. They had an established friendship group and they wanted to stay with their friends.
I do recall that some in years past, it's always also been like language immersion schools as well,
Yeah.
where they've been attending, a language immersion school that Milwaukee offers, that they wanted to continue to do that. I think that was the other thing that I recall.
That's what
Yeah, and that was often the 220 enrollments were specifically to those schools that they were opting into MPS under 220 for that reason.
Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you.
It'd be interesting to think about that academy piece, if that was anything, because that might tie into some of the things we're doing with Connect, to satisfy some of those families' needs in the future as well, if that was a reason.
Mm-hmm.
All right, any other questions? Otherwise, this is a good report. I think, Kim, you kind of highlighted it to say that we know that families have a choice, and we're glad when the families in our community choose to come to Greendale schools. But we continue to look and see and understand where there may be an opportunity that they opt somewhere else, and what can we do there. I think when we look through here, a couple of things that really stood out for me is, one is there were a number of K-4 learners that opted not to return to school this year, which impacted our numbers. We heard at our summer school report, particularly the band program did not operate this year, so that also impacted our numbers. So those were a couple of one-time items that were really impacted by the COVID that impacted the total enrollment and the overall budgets.
Yes, and our reopening plan was really attempting to be responsive to our community and the needs of our parents so they would choose to stay with us because while there are some things that are impacting us temporarily, if they're happy and satisfied in another district, then we may lose the opportunity to bring them back post-COVID. So we did a lot to try and retain all of our students and serve their needs. We did lose a few, but we're going to continue to present a product and that we think families want to come to, and we are seeing high retention rates relative to our peers in the region.
Thank you. All right, next item on the agenda is our annual Sustainability and Conservation and Education Report.
I'm sorry, I just had a quick question about
yes,
the last
please.
thing my microphone
Yep,
was
sorry
on.
about that, Paris.
Okay, so it's kind of relevant, color relevant, so I'm sorry if I sound confusing. I actually was an open enrollment student, and I did attend a bilingual school from kindergarten to 5th grade, so that was something nice that my family did enjoy. However, we did go to Greendale for the other opportunities that were available here. If you guys were one of you guys were asking about future and things like that, if that's part of the reason they decided to go to Greendale or leave Greendale. I have a question more related to one of the goals this year. So I know last meeting we talked about the staff is working on hiring more people of color and African Americans and things like that to increase our diversity. I had a question, are we looking at hiring other people of different ethnicities from Latinx or Hispanic ethnicity as well as Asian American and things like that?
Yes. Oh, you lost your...
Yeah, that's a great question. So actually at our next board meeting, I'll be updating and reporting on our trimester goals specific to our hiring initiatives. We're looking at hiring and increasing the diversity of our staff to be representative of our student demographics. And so the answer to your question is yes, definitely. That's an area that we're really focusing on. We have some new partnerships that we're working on to increase our candidate pool as well. So yes.
You don't have a working microphone, just yell.
All right, thank you, Julie and Maggie. Thank you, Paris. So Jonathan, the Conservation and Sustainability Report.
Yeah, so thank you. I'm giving the sustainability update this evening. The focus of that team last year was really honing down on just 3 goals. One goal was continuing local efforts in composting to support the district garden. 2 was plastics recycling, continuing that. And then 3 was supporting those composting and recycling programs with educational opportunities for our students. And so we have a really energetic team for sustainability that has representation across the district. Our recycling opportunities, we set a goal of 1,000 pounds of recycled plastic. People don't realize a lot of times that plastic film that you get, like with your grocery bags, that's not something that can go back in your recycling container. That needs specific types of recycling, and there are, that product can get reutilized. So if you've ever heard of trucks, decking materials, it can be made into something else, but it needs to be specially recycled for somewhere that can handle plastic film. And so we set this goal to say, let's get 1,000 pounds of that. Most everyone has some of those plastic bags around their house, whether they're getting it through groceries, whether they're getting that through deliveries. They have coming in through Amazon or Walmart. There's a lot that's around. We were able to get to 593 pounds prior to the shutdown. So we were on track for our goal for last year. And we had matched up with Target locally, and they were a specific Trex recycler. And so they were helping us with monitoring through that program and making sure that that was getting recycled back into products that others can utilize. So that sustainability piece is really important. Food waste composting. There was over 1,000 pounds composted by our garden coordinator, Heidi Hennessy, into the school garden. You see some of the breakdowns there across buildings throughout the school district. What I think is pretty cool is since 2012, we've collected more than 6 tons of food waste that we've been able to repurpose. Heidi gave me some updated numbers as of this morning. Compost for all of the 2020 calendar year, 1,610 pounds, and then harvested 686 pounds. She's had a partnership for composting since the pandemic with Panther Pub. And so continuing to find that avenues to continue the school garden. And that's been tremendous.
What does that
So she's able to get excess food scraps from Panther Pub, just like she would normally be able to get with the buckets that we keep at schools, and been able to utilize some of their food waste into our garden. Yep. In terms of supporting that composting and recycling programs and thinking about those educational opportunities, she's worked with members of our sustainability team to create opportunities to see the garden. So if you take a look at the newsletter that was linked out, you can see some pictures of that in action. But students learning how the food that they're putting into those buckets is getting picked up, delivered, put into the compost bins, and how that gets rotated into the soil. So students really get a better visual about how that system works from beginning to end. And I think that helps them to continue to be champions within their school buildings. Some additional school garden updates. 7 garden plots were offered to community members to plant their own vegetables and maintain their plots throughout the growing season. So we were thinking creatively this past summer of what we could do. There was a $10 fee charged, and all those that participated said they would like to participate again this next year. 3 NHS students were able to volunteer, following all of our socially distant protocols in order to fulfill their service hours. So we're appreciative of that, and we're glad that we were able to create additional opportunities. The school garden was represented at the downtown market on 4 Saturdays this season, raising money, selling plants and produce at the market. Produce has been sold to Panther Pub and donated to a Greendale family in need. Making compost is continuing in the garden. And then again, like we identified, compost material supplied by Panther Pub, food service, and district staff. At this time, we are not continuing that at the elementary schools, just with the protocols that they have in place this year. Things that are just a little bit different. So we're excited to continue forward. As I said, we've got an energetic team, and within the safety protocols they have this year, our activities like our plastic film recycling, they want to continue on in the schools. We can continue to do that in a safe manner and continue to encourage those opportunities for students to learn about recycling. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions the board has about our sustainability committee.
I just had a question about the garden plots. I found that interesting. How did they go about selecting people for it? Was that an application, and will they expand that at any point? I don't know if they even have the room.
Yeah, I think there was some short blurb communication that went out in the early part of summer to identify some community members that might be interested. We really didn't know where that would go, what that interest level would be. I don't know what the process will be for returning for this next year, but I can share feedback or ideas that the board may have about choosing that this next year.
Okay. Thank you.
One thing too was I know that some of the produce from the garden was also donated to the Senior Socials Club that was no longer meeting. So I know many of the seniors appreciated getting little care packages that came to them as well.
I just wanted to say this is new, like all new to me, but I think it's really cool. And I might just like volunteer for NHS hours now. It's a good idea. My question is, when was this plastic bag drive, and if you guys are planning on having another one in the future, because I have way too many in my house. And yeah.
We all do.
Yeah.
So that's awesome that you have some that you want to donate. I actually saw some of the new bins that were up this morning. So if you go to the NPR right now, there's one that is inside the NPR, and there may be some others that are distributed throughout the high school. So I know they've got that set up here, so you're welcome to bring those in. Yeah.
It started last fall, and they're always out. So there's not like a certain time period. Anytime you can bring them in, and they're usually by the doors, yeah.
Yep.
And there's one in district office if you guys
Okay,
want
I'll
to
let
take it.
some other fellow students know that, because I don't think they know that. But
Yes, thank you.
Maybe we'll add some announcements.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Let's fill it up.
Perhaps as a segue into our next agenda item, I was kind of curious how or if any of the sustainability focused clubs were connected to any of the construction that was going on, and thinking about the sustainability from that perspective.
Yep. So I think there's some limitations I think that we probably had around that in terms of some of the bulk of that summer construction happening after students were already outside the building. But certainly as we've got pictures here, there was a lot of that student interaction, and at the elementary school, some of that ability for them to do walkthroughs and be able to ask questions of the team. And I think in that respect, there was some really nice engagement opportunities that team created. C.G. Schmidt, definitely at all levels, was very welcoming and having that engagement with our students. In terms of the sustainability team, our focus is on that plastic recycling and that composting. So we've talked about some of the equipment that we would want longer term to help facilitate that. And I think right now it's managing through COVID and getting to that new normal where we may have flexibility to do some of the things that are not as simple to do with the safety protocols that we have in place. I'm not sure if that helps answer your question, but.
No, it's fine. I was just kind of curious. I know that they have a focus, so I didn't want to pretend like they were just trying to accomplish everything, but I wasn't sure if they were specifically looking at like the conservation of energy in the buildings and other things of that nature.
And I think we'll bring them into this, and we can ask that question here in a second.
I thought I heard him talking to you. That's why I was pointing.
All right, any other questions about conservation and sustainability? All right, thank you. And now kind of leading into an update on the referendum and the building project.
Yeah, so I'm going to work on bringing together the team that I have here because they've been anxiously awaiting having the conversation this evening and want to be able to give the board another update regarding the school construction process. So we've had them join in via Microsoft Teams. So I'll just kind of navigate them over to the microphone unit that I have here as questions come up. I provided to the board a presentation for the construction here this evening. And there we just wanted to lay out an agenda for this evening. And so really trying to give that broad overview. And it'll be just a second here.
The link for the presentation is at the bottom of the report, item 5.3, so that you can follow along the presentation that way. And it's also available for the community who may be watching from home.
Yep. So we wanted to give that progress update, talk about work remaining, the impact on reopening of schools, touch on the virtual tours of the building, a budget update, and then really get to next steps. So thinking about that progress update, we have here this evening Dan Durwachter from C.G. Schmidt. We have Nate Considine from Bray Architects. We also have Matt Wolfert from Bray. and Brian Kafarnas from the district all are joining digitally this evening. So when we're thinking about that progress update, it's really important that we continue to hit on all of those goals identified at the front end of the project. So there's our slide where we've identified the check marks of our different areas: increasing school safety and security, improving our learning environments, creating flexible and adaptable workspaces, and then improving our building efficiency and sustainability. And we've identified that we've hit on those areas. The one area that we talked about that we wanted to address that we could not because of limitations was our College Park Elementary with some of our vehicle traffic flow and site circulation. One of the things that we've heard feedback on is the condition of that parking lot. And so as we get to some of the contingency dollars, what we've talked about is the need to prioritize funds to make that project a priority of those remaining contingency dollars is to renovate that parking lot. As we were doing that construction project, it would not have been feasible to fully renovate that at the same time while we had trucks coming through. And as we look at the time frame needed for that, we would be looking at summer of 2021 when we could cordon off that parking lot and do a full grind and resurfacing of that. And so we are planning on that for summer of 2021. Brian has had conversations with the village because we've collaborated for cost savings in the past on engineering services and best cost to share in doing some of that pavement work. And so we've had that conversation of whether we can line up those services to get the best pricing possible to do that work next summer through contingency dollars.
And I think it's important to point out that the reason that we did not improve traffic flow was due to the change in floodplain maps that came out the end of the month after the referendum was approved. And so there was some regrouping and some redesign, and we were able to handle many of the projects, but we were not able to change the layout of the hard surfaces in the floodplain, which is the driveway and the parking lot for College Park. So that is why we weren't able to make improvements to traffic flow, but we can certainly make improvements to the quality of the pavement next summer.
And that's what I just wanted to confirm is that the items that you're referring to, Jonathan, are resurfacing the existing circular drive and the existing parking lot as opposed to making changes to the footprint of both those.
Correct.
Thank you.
So then the second item on here, we wanted to talk about the work that's remaining. And so I wanted to give Dan the opportunity to talk to the board a little bit about what that looks like and what the timeline is.
Sure. So my name is Dan Director. I was the senior project manager, kind of heading up project. You guys, sorry I couldn't be there in person, but all of our major construction activities are complete. We have about a handful of punch list related items on each of the projects that we're working through. All the materials needed have been ordered. We're just waiting for them to come in, and we'll get those installed right away. There's also a handful of requests from staff and facilities once they got into the spaces to, as they move in and feel them out. There's a few tweaks that were made, and again, that material equipment has been ordered, and we're just waiting for those items to arrive. But our end goal is to be done with all activities by mid-November. I'd be pulling our trailer out of the high school right around Thanksgiving is the time frame right now.
Questions that the board has about timeline there?
I was just curious if you could give some highlights of some of the things that are still getting, finished up. I know that in some of the virtual tours, we saw obviously some construction happening in certain spots, but for those that aren't in every one of the schools, it might be worth just a high-level overview.
Sure. There's there's some additional casework modifications that were kind of requested at some of the reception desks at in Canterbury and College Park. There's a few additional door slabs that once we did our new work, how it transitioned to some of the existing doors were in rougher shape than planned, so a few more door slabs were ordered. Door hardware type items, we had a few tweaks that had to be made, and unfortunately the lead time for some door hardware these days is pushing 6 to 8 weeks, so we're just waiting for those type of materials to come in. We'll do a quick swap out and just be able to call it done.
So are many of the learning environments impacted at all right now then by the construction that's being finished off?
So our learning environments are not being disrupted by that. And Dan, obviously you can give some more color to that, but I know you've been utilizing the Wednesday days that we have where there's virtual instruction to be able to get into those buildings if there's some things that need to be tweaked.
That's correct. Wednesday's been the day that we've kind of lined everybody up for. With the longer break last week, we did a few more things on Thursday, Friday, but the focus has been Wednesday or before or after school, so we're not affecting students at all.
So then in terms of reopening schools, I think the piece to touch on here is the timing of that was extremely valuable in the planning that we did during summertime, as we identified the need at the elementary schools to get to cohorts of 15 students, imagining what that would have looked like under our old footprint at our elementaries without our 6 additional classrooms at Highland View, without our additional 2 classrooms at Canterbury and our additional 3 classrooms that became our kindergarten wing. The feat to try to do that would have been extremely difficult. And so I think as we're providing information to our community and talking about the needs that we had, it obviously is not something that this community anticipated. We knew that we had growing resident enrollment, and that was the need. But those spaces were immediately utilized, even with lower student populations. Some students are going to virtual classes, and we have 20 to 25%. But as we moved to cohorts of 15 students in a classroom, that was key to making sure that we didn't have students that were just kind of in the middle of the hallway or in the library, and that would be where their room was set up. That we were able to set up those dedicated classrooms. And so I wanted to highlight that, the ability to have that separate gymnasium and multi-purpose room space has been really important. At 2 of our buildings, at College Park and at Canterbury, lunches are set up in a way for social distancing where they're using some combination of both spaces at the same time, whereas before they would have one lunch space. We felt like it was important to try to have lunches within the cafeteria if at all possible. Some schools have chosen to do that all in the classroom. From a cleaning and sanitizing point of view, it's a big ask and a big lift to have all the meals also happening in the classroom where you are the rest of the day. So our staffs have done a really good job of teaching students routines, having them spread out at those cafeteria tables, but having that additional space has been really important to spreading students out and having that social distancing within our buildings.
I like the virtual tours that the elementary principals put together. Those were really nice to see how that layout was, and it does look like you were able to separate off the lunch hours. So I think that's definitely a good use of this new addition that we have in those buildings.
I think the tours also showed the pride that those principals took in their
Right,
schools.
right.
Mhm. I will say that the GoPro strapped to the chest got a little bit, you'd take a nausea medicine after a while because it was a little,
Oh, was it a
a
little?
little rocky, yeah, watching that after a while. So, but it was great to see everything. It was just, a viewer beware.
I don't know if this is off topic a little bit, but we have an election coming up next week. How are these spaces being used for that?
So one of the issues within the referendum was around safety and security, and so we wanted lock-off spaces that the community could use and secure our student passing areas and our student hallways. So in all of the schools, there is a lock-off area where classrooms are separated from a public space. There will be a little bit of potential crossover with short-term supervision at a couple of the schools. So at Highland View, we're able to secure the building completely. At Canterbury, we're also able to secure the building completely. At College Park, we're able to secure the building. However, they're coming past the security for their lunch. Voting will happen in the gym, and they will eat lunch in the cafeteria. So for that 2-hour period in which students are in and out of the cafeteria, there will need to be supervision to prevent passing into the building, but we're able to do it without students crossing paths with voters, which right now is also important for close contact and community spread of virus. And at the high school, we are able to secure with the doors that you see tonight. We're able to secure the building so that those voting in the high school are not able to enter the learning spaces. So some of the project upgrades included secure lock-off from the school for those voting sites.
Thank you.
In Paris, how do you see, have you heard anything from your peers around the spaces and the things that are different at the high school?
Yes, I haven't been able to spend a lot of time in like the gym area, but I remember that was one of the first things being done, and I was like super excited about it. I was like, wow. One of my favorite things though has to do with the parking space in the front, because I knew there was always students that were like, why do I have to park so far away? Typically you're not supposed to park there anyways, but like today when I was running late, I was able to park there, which was really nice, and I thought it was a good use of just that grass space that wasn't exactly needed. But I also enjoy, probably one of the biggest things is the band room, because I am a band student and I really like the layout. It's not what I expected at all, but there has been like thought into what they were doing. I think one of the best parts is that there's actually a balcony in there, as well as marking block spaces off as if they were yards. So if we don't have the ability to practice outside, or if we did need to accomplish that social distance thing, even coming spring, we can have some people outside, we can have some people inside, and we can break off in sectionals, or we can even practice with a drum major if they're on the balcony and things like that. I know I'm getting really technical, but yes, it's been very evident, so thank you.
I think that's a good point, is that, we're coming to the conclusion that construction and the building is going to be completed, but we haven't really fully utilized things as intended. So we'll spend a couple of months and probably all of next year just getting used to things like that as well. So exciting times, but it will continue.
So one of the spaces that you're not in Connect. Okay, so Connect is our new career pathway program, and the space on the other side of this wall, it can be opened and used as part of the library space and the workspace, but it can also be closed off with the glass doors like it is right now. And it is a sizable room with some breakout rooms for project-based learning around the perimeter, and that is being used for our Connect space. And I know that our first career pathway is very happy with the space and able to do some different things with their project-based learning experiences and their meetings with mentors.
So we provided a financial update within the presentation here this evening. Our finance savings from interest revenues is greater than what we had originally estimated. I think one of the big changes with that, in addition to having some additional dollars for contingency, is that we had originally decided within the budget, in order to come in balance, that we would be pulling dollars from Fund 50, our food service budget. I think what we have seen there is that the situation has changed significantly with the revenue shortfall within that program, and we've been looking at ways that we can achieve sustainability. So as that situation has changed, we believe that of those remaining dollars, if we're able to avoid pulling that fund balance from our food service fund, that it's appropriate to look at making a change and not doing that, because at this point we still anticipate a loss this year of $100,000 plus within our food service fund, and that's important that we continue to keep that balance remaining to cover that shortfall, because that Fund 50 needs to balance on its own, or those dollars need to come from the instructional bucket. So we feel like that alignment, given that we do have the dollars to pay for the project and we have dollars remaining for contingency items, that kind of change can help us with that financial sustainability for our food service program.
And one thing that Greendale residents may, or I guess anyone that's paying into this might be interested in knowing, is that the cost of materials right now in construction are through the roof. So it was a good time to get this done before right now.
So then I think another key piece is just coming back around to conversations that have been happening since 2016 around long-range facility planning. And so that conversation I will turn over to Nate and Matt Wolfert from Bray to talk a little bit about needs analysis. So we linked some additional slides today that cover those highlights, but I'll let Nate lead that conversation, just updating the board on where we are at from those things that were targeted.
Thank you, Jonathan. Hi, everyone. My name is Nate Considine with Bray Architects, as he mentioned. Today, we just wanted to touch base on the needs that were identified back in 2016 when we looked at doing a referendum for the district. And there is, I believe, 4 pages to the document that accompanies the meeting today. The first page is primarily just the elementary schools, and at a high level, you'll see that there are items crossed off in red, there are items highlighted in green, and there are clouded items. The items crossed off in red, such as updating interior lighting throughout the district, has been accomplished throughout the referendum. And then there are items, as I mentioned, in green, that the green highlight actually represents a reoccurring or ongoing item that the district should keep an eye on, that they will have to invest money in throughout the future, and continue to improve upon the facilities. Those things include adding electronic keys throughout the buildings and electrified locks for exterior doors and things like that. Roof replacements are always an ongoing and reoccurring expense for districts. A continued emphasis in one-to-one computing support and infrastructure. HVAC systems continually have options to be upgraded, both for health and just for just overall operation of the building. And so those items that I just kind of mentioned are really unified kind of across all 5 buildings in the district. So you'll see that those are continued to be highlighted in green in the slide. Some other items that, for instance, at College Park that were accomplished outside of LED fixtures was obviously we fixed the security entry enhancement. There was a request for art and music classrooms. We were able to accomplish that throughout the remodel. And then park and rec storage as well. There were a couple of items that, so those were the items that were completed. There are a couple items that are now clouded with like a black cloud around those. Those are items that have been realized by the district since 2016, since this needs diagram was created. And one of them you've already talked about tonight. So number 11, the parking lot replacement, the surface needs to be replaced. Another item that would be potentially considered by the district for future work at College Park would be finish the exterior metal wall replacement. As you notice on the building, a large portion of what was the main entry was replaced, and now it's just probably time to finish the project. Moving on to Highland View, I'm not going to repeat the keyless entry and the roof replacement, but some of the things that were accomplished throughout the referendum were LED lighting again, secure entry enhancements, shared gymnasium and cafeteria spaces. We were able to soundproof the current music room, additional locker spaces, an open concept renovation in one of the classrooms, and administration office space needs were all accomplished at Highland View. One of the items that have been addressed or that have been realized since 2016 would be that the existing south parking lot needs to be resurfaced as well at some point in time. Obviously, I think College Park has a higher pressing need with that replacement, but Highland View has a similar need there. And yes, throughout the referendum, we did extend the west parking lot, creating a drop-off zone for buses, but the south lot is in need of a little help at Highland View. Moving on to Canterbury, again, some of the reoccurring items like roofing and keying, but some of the items that will continue to occur. But some of the items that we achieved at that building was a shared gymnasium cafeteria space. Achieved that through the addition, parking lot expansion, and we replaced the lift with an elevator that is much safer for the building. One item that was not fully completed throughout the 2016, since 2016, would just be additional flooring replacement in the building. So that's a future project at Canterbury. Moving on to page 2 is the middle school. So some of the open items would be special education classroom renovation and a stage renovation that was identified back in 2016. It really depends, obviously, on what the curriculum is and what the needs are, and that can change, obviously, year by year. But back in 2016, the stage was underutilized space that could be renovated in a future project. One area that's new to the green highlight is the temporary wall replacement. We did manage to do 2 of those, but as needs change and COVID changed and everything like that, we replaced 2 temporary walls, the district did, but there are 2 still to be replaced in the future if the district sees that need as well. One piece that we did accomplish throughout the referendum at the middle school was the gymnasium bleacher replacement, in addition to the LED fixtures. Moving on to the high school, the green highlight again, roof replacement, and HVAC, things like that. A new one here is interior lighting. And, a lot of the interior lighting at the high school has been upgraded. There's just one LED upgrade left, and that's really the athletic fields. We just didn't feel comfortable crossing it off, as that is one additional project that the district should look to do in the future. We were able to complete, via the red lines, the air conditioning piece was completed via the referendum. The track and tennis courts, library repurposing, which you guys are sitting in right now. We also gained ADA access to the current pool, and we took care of the gymnasium bleacher guardrail compliance piece as well. Other pieces that were accomplished would be the outdoor space needs regarding outdoor athletic venues, such as track and turf, and the track and turf replacements, as well as the tennis court. The high school does have the most opportunity for needs in the future, and so you'll see item 9 is the gymnasium space need. So we knew back in 2016, and we still know that there's a potential need for some sort of field house or additional gym space, and curriculum and extracurricular needs may drive that one way or the other as years go on. Another item would be that kind of go hand in hand would be 12 and 13. It was noted back in 2016 that a renovation of the existing science classrooms is needed, and one additional science lab within the high school building would be helpful from a program and academic need perspective. One of the last things that was identified in 2016 at the high school would be special education classrooms. In 2016, it was noted that there may be some increased numbers for special education students. Obviously, that can change throughout the years as well, and depending on what the needs are of the district, that could be a need one year and not the next. So something to keep on the district's radar. There are two things that I'll close with, or I guess before I ask if there's any questions at the high school, is that although we updated the ADA access to the pool, the existing pool vessel or the pool body of itself is deteriorating from beneath. We have some concrete issues and some just some chemicals that have been sitting in that area for a long time and take a toll on a building. So not only that, but the pool, as you know, is not long or deep enough for WIAA events. So initial or additional study of that pool and what the district wants to do with it is definitely a next project as well. And then something that was mentioned earlier in the board meeting tonight was the Pathways curriculum. And at one point in time, it was thought that the current wrestling room could be renovated for a Pathways curriculum space. Although they are successfully using the library now, and that is great that they are doing so, that library was really created to house any sort of curriculum in that space for flexibility for the district. So to give Pathways their own space could be something the district considers in the future. That's the list in itself. Is there any questions?
There was a question a resident brought up about the roof of the high school. I don't know if that was something that was addressed at all.
I think Nate, she's asking about the HVAC system on top of the high school that is loud.
Yes, so as you know, when we installed air conditioning into the high school, there are some quite loud units that need to do so to provide that air conditioning. And we realized this past summer that one was abnormally loud, and so therefore worked with CG Schmidt to identify the problem and solutions. We have identified a solution, and it should be much quieter than it had been in June. And we don't believe that there's been additional conversation from the residents nearby since then. And so we do feel like that issue is taken care of.
Okay, thank you.
And board members, if you have other questions, feel free to add that. But I think to kind of bring this conversation into focus, there's a lot of information here within these maps, but it is really important when you're getting towards the wind down period of a project that you refocus on what the initial goals were, what that follow through was, so that we can communicate that out to the community. But also that we understand what the continuing needs will be. The referendum wasn't designed to rebuild every piece of equipment, every building in the district and start all over. It was meant to address deferred maintenance needs and meet the needs of growing student population, particularly at some of our lower grade levels. So what I would suggest is the consideration of some type of work session as we get into the next few months to really have dedicated time to get deeper into this information. We're trying to give a higher level overview, but really make sure that we're understanding all the projects that have been completed through the referendum, and then understand what next steps will be. As we look at creating a long-range plan going forward for maintaining our facilities to keep them at that level that our community expects with the investments that they've made, understanding what those next steps will be. And that may be something that's outside of a normal board meeting, but I'll look to Kim and the board for direction on what would be the appropriate venue to really have the time to get your heads around that conversation. But that's our focus, is how do we use this to springboard to that next conversation for sustaining now that high level of building quality.
And I think that'd be excellent. And I think the key that we saw when we talked a little bit about the additional needs, some of them are just ongoing. Roofing is always something that's going to need to be taken care of. Parking lot services is another thing that is always going to need to be addressed. But then there are some one-time items. Should we take the wrestling room and modify it to be more of a science lab? Those are kind of one-time things. So I think as we look at some long-term plans and some long-range facilities, making sure that we have the right balance between, okay, what are we going to have to do every year versus what can we maybe budget for that would allow us to maybe make some one-time adjustments and one-time investments.
Mm-hmm. And I guess I would like to see, right now, some of these spaces we're not utilizing because of the pandemic, and maybe it's a little bit of a wait and see till we get all the students back in the space to see how that's being utilized before we can make decisions on whether we change a wrestling room into a special ed room or something like that, so we know for sure.
Yes, but I do think it's important as we look at some of those ongoing costs that we have a strategy and a plan for how we're going to budget for maintenance.
I would agree.
So that we're not going back to the community and asking for additional money every time we need to maintain a facility. So that'll be important from a long-range planning perspective, and then also to consider what are some of our learning need changes and our strategic priorities and how we can make adjustments to spaces. The adjustments that we made to spaces, some of the learning spaces that have allowed for increased collaboration, really do support our strategic priorities around project-based learning and collaboration and communication, which are very important to our core attributes for a Greendale graduate. And so those have been really actualized in some of the projects, but to continue that conversation and not just stop because we finished this project.
Kim, do you envision, there was a committee of community members as well. Do you envision pulling any of them back together for these discussions, or, even for them to see where their progress with what they've done has kind of led to?
Yes, we have a couple of needs. Jonathan has established the citizen finance team. I will be shortly after in the month of November, and next week you'll see our plans to review and update the strategic plan, and that will require community member input. And once that's done, then we'll determine what our needs are for community members from a facility perspective, from a strategic planning perspective.
Okay, good.
Going back to a couple comments that were made here, I do think that we should address kind of the ongoing maintenance costs and understand what those are going to be for the things that we have in front of us. So what is kind of that reserve study, if you will, for our district, so that we understand, if we just want to maintain the things that we need every single year, what is that going to cost us? We typically have that $200,000 as a capital improvement within our budget, and obviously that changes every once in a while, but what should that number be? Should that be lower or higher, depending on the things that we actually need to be doing and taking on? And then that actually, I think, will make it easier for us after we come out of the strategic plan to then validate what needs we actually have, those one-time needs, as you called it, Joe, where we need to maybe put some investments into changing this room into this room, or doing this, or add addition of a lab, or whatever it was or is that we actually need. Without forgetting about, obviously, the investments we just made. I don't want to lose sight of that because, it's not the shiny new car when you're maintaining something that you already exist, but we also need to make sure that we're maintaining what already exists as part of that process.
The other thing that I would add is that we also take a look at, in the past, our community service fund balance has been used to upgrade the outdoor track or to help with the tennis courts behind the high school. We've kind of used some of that fund balance to support community-wide activities, kind of in making sure that we adhere to the intent of that fund balance. So are there things within that community services fund balance that would support some investments at the pool level or at the field house level, things like that? Having said that, those are probably big ticket items, but are there incremental investments that we can make that would support that using the community services fund balance?
Any other questions that you've got for the team?
The only other thing that I guess I've heard from some of the staff and just kind of wondering myself is, we really didn't take advantage of, because of the situation, we really didn't take advantage of the air conditioning this summer. We didn't have as much classes there, and we haven't hit the cold season yet where we're dealing with the heating. What types of, how are we looking at that to make sure that the different zones are adequately heated or cooled and things like that? How does that typically happen, and what does that generally look like?
Yes, I can probably let Dan and or Brian speak to how we are kind of tuning in that HVAC, our air conditioning and our heating, like you've said, because we've installed it and we may not have had our full programming going on, and what that timeline is going to be before we would say this is fully kind of tuned into what we would expect.
Talk to that. Well, it's an ongoing issue every day. We're fielding emails and complaints from staff and custodians. We have techs at probably 3 of the buildings every day making adjustments. Last Thursday and Friday we had training on the units, the new units. We still need some computer training, but it's ongoing. We had to set some different priorities on the system because where you were used to have walls completely, but it still has some of the same diffusers, some diffusers added. We've got air coming in from the hallway, so we didn't have the heat down in the hallway yet. So now that's back on as of today because that'll aid in warming up the IMC. It's going to be an ongoing issue into next year. We know everything is working. It's just getting it tweaked correctly. And it's hard this time of the year when it's cold in the morning and it could be 68 by the afternoon. So we need a little heat in the morning and a little cooling in the afternoon. Yeah, it's just an ongoing thing. It's part of our day.
You heard Brian say it could take a year to balance. That's about how long it took for us to balance after the 2008 referendum. It takes some time just to get them programmed right.
All right, thank you.
One thing I'd like to add too is it's hard when the rooms usually are occupied 25 to 27 kids and we're at 15. So we've lost some of the body heat too. So if I make an adjustment for the way it is today, it's going to hopefully be different next year when we're back to capacity.
It's a good point. Thank you, Brian. All right, any other questions regarding the building construction?
I know you mentioned contingency and leveraging those dollars. Could you just reiterate, kind of wander through what that looks like at this point? I know it's on the slide or the...
To add that for those that might be tuning in. So at this point, we're looking at approximately $300,000 from our guaranteed maximum price on our construction contract with C.G. Schmidt. So Dan and I have had that ongoing conversation He's going to know more by Thanksgiving as we wrap up some of those items that he spoke about this evening, what those costs come in at. But there was contingency that was built into that construction budget. And so it's anticipated that 300 would be that low end. Depending on how everything shakes out, it could come in higher than that. But we would be getting those dollars reallocated back from CG Schmidt from that guaranteed maximum price. In addition to that, what we've identified is about 400,000 in owner contingency dollars that are in reserves. And again, the big driver is some additional interest revenue than what we originally projected. We kept that pretty conservative. And so we have those additional dollars available. So we're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of 700,000 that we would be able to put towards these remaining projects and some of those areas that Nate identified where there's current needs.
So to summarize, we came in on budget and on schedule. So that's an accomplishment. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I know the team worked extremely hard at that, so they appreciate the thanks for doing both of those things.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
All right, and thanks to the team for being joining us over video. All right, next item on the agenda is early college credit programs.
Thank you.
Okay, so the early college credit program replaced the youth options program and the course options program. There's been some evolution in this over the last several years. And so it used to be something that came to the board for approval. When we switched to early college credit, we shifted it to administrative approval and board information. So this is for information. These programs have been approved for students to continue their learning. We are legally required to do so, and we've fallen within all of the parameters. But in addition to the legal requirement, we are capitalizing on the career-based opportunities that exist and ensuring that our students have access to explore career pathways, which was a strategic priority. And so with that, I'll let Maggie share.
New to the dual enrollment academies at Greendale, so I really wanted to have a better understanding. So I asked Mr. Chris Mensch to give me the dual enrollment academies, and I talked to Luke Koskorsky, who's part of the EMT firefighter, and so he spends his day waking up at 7 in the morning, going to WT. The Waukesha County Technical College, and working there every day. He has enough credits to graduate to go there. And this is going to help him move to become an officer faster, so it's a great opportunity for him. And then I had an opportunity to also talk to Katie Ramirez, who was part of the CNA program our junior year and is now in the nursing dual enrollment academy, and she wants to be a dermatologist, is already looking at different schools to college to go to and deciding if she's going to major in nursing or biology so she can become a dermatologist. So I just think that, again, Greendale's offering these amazing opportunities to our students so that they are not just ready for college, but career. And if you have any questions, I would take those now.
My only comment is I think these are great programs, and I'm glad to hear that the students have really taken advantage of it. I'm wondering if there's more that we can do to get the community and families to understand what these programs are, and how do we incorporate them and making sure that people know to take advantage of them and know how they fit into their overall schedule and overall.
I think that's a great question. That's one of the things I asked Mr. Mensch about when I met with him, because I was trying to have understanding of how do kids have access, and I asked both of the students. I heard his perspective, and I also heard the students. So it happens when they're meeting with their guidance counselors around course selection. And then it also and the kids echoed that. They said, by looking at talking about our interests, where we want to go and what our next steps are, that's when those conversations happen. And I do wonder around, I have some curiosity about like the gatekeeper of those decisions and how we can ensure that all kids have access to that. So that's something that, Mr. mentioned, I kind of, as the dual enrollment coordinator, we've talked about and how we can increase that. So thank you for highlighting that.
And I think what you were saying and how I interpret it is making sure that all students, so,
Yep.
all demographics, that it's not just families who are attuned to this or families who are engaged and understand how this works and because they had an older sibling or something like that. But, do we have representation with all these programs as well?
Yep.
About 4 years ago, when the dual enrollment academies started, the first one that we had, there was one student who went to WCTC for their dual enrollment academies. And just 3 years ago, we had 4 students that were going out, and this year we have 26, and over 40 applied. And so if you look at our senior class, because our dual enrollment academies are seniors, they're not juniors. The juniors are they might be taking some of the individual courses, but those dual enrollment academies, which are nearly a full program, we have 26 students out, and in a graduating class of 220, we are over 10% of our students taking advantage of some of these programs, and that's been some rapid growth. At the same time, in our scorecard goals, one of the things we talked about was those early college credit opportunities and ensuring we maintain over 90% of our students taking advantage of those opportunities, but that we increase enrollment in some of these programs. So while we've seen some rapid growth as students are learning about it and getting more word of mouth in addition to the advertising through the course selection guide and the academic and career planning, we still have goals to increase at a greater rate because these are practical opportunities to go straight to have college almost completed by the time you leave Greendale High School and be able to go to career, which is important.
Yeah, and that's really good. It's good to see those numbers increase like that and having families and students take advantage of that. If we're relying on word of mouth, and I know that's not what you said, but that could perpetuate, that we don't have representation, so making sure that all students are aware of it and take advantage of it.
Agreed. I would echo also what Jill said. On the parent side, I have a student at the high school, and I wasn't even aware of all these offerings because this student had information out to parents also.
Mm-hmm.
There's students about that.
It might help people plan because, there's so
Mm-hmm.
students are expected to, not that they have to have a defined plan, but at least understand a pathway to say, okay, as an 8th grader, what am I going to take my freshman year, and making sure that we set them up so that they do have these opportunities as upperclassmen.
I think there has been a lack of advertising to it, especially when there is times counselors come in and they talk to the 8th graders about what their first year of high school is going to look like. I think another part of the reason students haven't taken advantage of it is it's just simply not of their interest. I try to take every opportunity presented to me. I personally didn't do dual enrollment because I don't think I'm going to go into the career path that was as an option in dual enrollment. So we can see how promoting it more might increase, but there also is a chance it won't to certain extents just because of the options that are available for that.
And you're absolutely right, Paris, because there are going to be trade-offs. Students who enroll in these dual enrollments, this might not be a great example, but they may not be able to participate in the marching band. So there are going to be trade-offs like that, but as long as people are able to understand those opportunities and decide for themselves what makes the most sense.
Well, and I think the students are the best advocates. So even just getting Katie and Luke in front of some of the kids to say, here's my story, here's some opportunities for us. I think the more we can do that, and that's why I really wanted to talk to some kids. So I had an idea from their point of view of what some of the access issues were and what some of the successes were as well.
Great.
What was I noticed there's a couple, Calculus 3 and Calculus 4, where there's different places that people are going.
Yeah, so those are for students who have gone all the way through our math curriculum, and we do not have calculus for, so they might be taking it at Marquette or UWM, and we still offer that so they can continue their math.
And is there any, part of me was just looking at, it seemed like there was Wisconsin virtual schools, maybe WVS, I'm assuming.
Yes, those are student preferences for learning readiness. So WVS is always an option, but some of our students say, yeah, that learning format doesn't work for me, that learning modality, and I'd like to go to an in-person university or do something of that nature. So that's really a student preference on instructional delivery and transportation.
And is there any benefit or value, and maybe that's, like you said, the virtual option versus going to Marquette? So there's really the Marquette if you want to go in person, and then if you want to go virtual, you go to WVS.
Well, it also has to fit in their schedule.
Okay.
So that's a big challenge sometimes, because you have to leave, go to Marquette, come back. So that can be a challenge.
Okay.
And then WVS, depending on the class, it could be at your own. It could be asynchronous at your own pace versus having to sit in front of a class. So there's some more options, and depending on what works best for you and your schedule.
And from a cost perspective, Wisconsin Virtual School is a lower cost, but whether it's Marquette, MATC, or UW, there are costs set by the state for college credit through early college credit programs. So Marquette is more pricey for an undergraduate student than UWM, but when it comes to youth option, or the early college credit, which replace youth options, those costs are controlled.
Okay, yeah, that was more what I was kind of, and partially just administratively, like how do you manage all these different relationships and everything else, but it seems like it's really either the virtual option or an option. It's not like there's 12 different Calc 3 options that students are taking advantage of.
And my understanding is it's really the students that are finding those alternatives.
Correct.
So to your point, the students probably had to find something, a course offering at a local college at 8 a.m. so that they could come back by 9:30 or whatever the timing was. So it's really the students that are also finding what works best. It's not as if our counselors say, if you want to do this, here are your 3 options. It's most of these students, most of those are students finding it on their own.
Yeah, they shop for themselves, and there are evening courses. There's been times when they're like, oh, it's on Tuesday evenings, but I have marching band, so I can't take that class. So they're just like a college student, they're working out their schedule.
So transportation obviously falls on the student, I'm guessing?
Yes, and that's why you see some of them choosing virtual options, because they don't have access to transportation.
And that's what I was wondering, for some students that maybe don't have the means to do that, they're not able to go to one of these?
We've had some conversations. At one point, New Berlin was busing students to WCTC, and we coordinated that if we could get students out there, and so they would carpool to New Berlin, and then they'd get on the bus and ride with New Berlin to WCTC. So they've been working on some creative solutions for transportation if they don't have transportation, and Mr. Minch has been one of those people advocating and looking for partnerships where we can provide transportation. Okay. And so we have to balance our cost with access, and so we've been working to find that just right balance, and there is quite a few carpools.
And then I know we've been doing some kind of some experiments with ASU as an example, but I'm assuming since it's a Wisconsin program, is that not eligible for this?
Yeah, we're doing it, but it doesn't fall under the early college credit as a requirement. Okay. But we do have 2 students enrolled in ASU computer programming this semester. We tried to do some students in psychology, but based on ASU's changes, the classes were full.
Can you speak to the advanced welding and the nursing programs? And the only reason I'm asking about that is when you look at most of the other ones, there are usually 1 or 2 students that are taking those classes. So what is it about the welding and the nursing that we have, 6 in the advanced welding at MATC and 9 at the nursing?
Mm-hmm.
Is there something unique there, or something that...
Yes, so what we know, and we've learned through ACP and through our students doing some career interest inventories, 40% of our graduates are in the healthcare profession, and I think over a third of our students identify healthcare as their first choice of career pathway. And so simply by volume of students who are interested in healthcare, nursing has been incredibly popular. It's why our Project Lead the Way biomedical science program has exploded, and why we're seeing enough students request CNA to offer a local class, and therefore we're seeing them follow that progression into a practical nursing program like MATC. We actually have, this year we started with 15 who were interested, but not all of them followed through, and so we were at 9. So nursing is popular because it is very practical, it is very applicable immediately, and it's already a program or an industry in which over a third of our students express interest in future career opportunities.
Did I hear you say that it's offered locally then, or?
Yeah, our CNA course is offered spring semester. Last year we offered it for the first time in the spring, and we had 11 students take the CNA course and become certified nursing assistants. It was a little sticky because of COVID, but they did eventually earn their CNA, and some of them are working. And the CNA is a prerequisite requirement for the Nursing Dual Enrollment Academy, the year-long program that leads towards a licensed practical nursing degree. And then the advanced welding and the welding are skilled trades that we see a high level of interest in. So in our 9th and 10th grade, as we look at students who are interested in the skilled trades, we have about 100 to 150 who identify this skilled trade pathway, technical career, as their preferred pathway. And so we're seeing some opportunities there for students. So they may take some introduction to the skilled trades carpentry work, but ultimately they see the welding, and we have for the last 10 years partnered with MATC to offer a single welding class, and so we're seeing an increased number of students follow that pathway. And the welding is a one-year program, so when they graduate from Greendale High School and they finish the Dual Enrollment Academy, they are licensed and can go straight to work.
And the only other thing I want to add, Kim, is just the cohort model. So they're with kids in there from Greendale that they know. And that has been both Luke and Katie talked about the benefit of that, to have someone to work through these college level courses together, and how that has been a gift.
Paris, any additional comments that you had to share? Or?
On the dual enrollment?
Yeah.
Not specifically.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you, Maggie. Next item on the agenda is student board member report. So this is an opportunity for you to share what's happening in school, or anything that you'd like to share.
Okay, yeah, we didn't have a homecoming. I think our school is planning to have one sometime in spring, if that's a possibility. But we did successfully have a spirit week. Obviously not all students participated like normal because of the weird year. But we were successful in the administration coordinating most of it. We did have spirit kings and queens to keep that tradition going, and people could send their submissions home, even at home through like Google Survey, via Instagram. And we announced the winners there. They did get a sweatshirt with Joe Bustos, which is our events coordinator for most of the part, but he basically does everything. This fun animated character of him on his gator and a panther. To go along with that, there was also a hide and seek, go find Bustos in the Greendale area and village, and many students participated that on their virtual day, which was something fun to do. Many students didn't participate, aka me, because they were taking their PSAT, which many 10th graders were invited to, as well as juniors that wanted to invite themselves to get that practice in. And there should be results for that coming December 7th and 8th for students to see what they're doing well and what they can improve on. That the PSAT website also does have other resources students can take advantage of to practice for that this next coming year going into their senior year. And then as well as the PACT is taking place this year, so juniors will be participating in that on Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday, so all groups have a chance and ability to do that. A group Monday, virtual students on a Wednesday, and then B group on Thursday. I also did have a chance to talk with Mr. Minch this week, and he said that juniors will be offered meetings that they can join soon to talk about future majors and also narrowing down their schools for where they want to go to college, such as if they're not doing the dual enrollment program. And one thing to go off of that and kind of like what we were just talking about, there's lots of things in Zello he was showing me that I don't think are like implemented in our ACT, or not ACT, ACP classes, which I think we could look into, because a lot of the time there is so many resources out there on like that website and other ones, and it is a required class that the students take to graduate. So really honing down on like what is important, what's gonna like help them for the future, and really like try to implement what they're gonna do, instead of just taking lots of surveys, because sometimes it is familiar things that we've taken multiple times. Expand on that, as well as talk to counselors to see if they have other information and resources we could use. And then just the last thing, AP fees are coming in, and students are required to pay that by November 10th, as well as many students are taking advantage of the CAP courses or Cooperative Academic Partnership Program, mostly seen in foreign language. That is a more expensive course. However, it does narrow down the option of requirements supposed to be taken to get credits in college. It is $100 a credit, but you can take those classes in high school to try to eliminate it for your years in college. So, yeah.
And I think the district, the high school, pays for those fees if you're a student on free and reduced lunch. Is that?
Yep. Yes. And I love how Paris had to explain who Joe Bustos was.
Thank you very much, Paris. Sounds like the school year is trying to have as much normalcy as possible these days, given where we are at. But good to hear that there's some things that are going on, like the Spirit King and Queen. All right, next item on the agenda, legislative update.
So I've got a few things. Well, one, they haven't been in session for a while. I think it's been like 180 days or something. That's what I've seen. But Assembly Speaker Robin Voss just recently announced a task force on racial disparities, and I thought this was interesting considering all the work we're doing with welcoming diversity. It's being comprised of 4 legislators and 28 community members. I did reach out to his office to learn more about how you could be one of those community members, because I thought it would be nice to maybe be involved with that, but haven't heard back yet. They will address racial disparities, educational opportunities, which was of interest, public safety, law enforcement policies, and standards. So it's a combination of several areas of racial disparities. The Wisconsin DPI is going to be receiving $10 million over the course of 5 years, a federal grant to expand student mental health services. So I don't know how that will trickle down to the schools, but that is something in the makings right now. This one we all know about, but I'll just repeat it, that Governor Evers' mask mandate still remains in place after the judicial review. And I think Greendale is taking steps anyways to ensure that we have that in place. And then finally, the DPI has initiated rulemaking changes to Chapter PI 34, the administrative rules chapter that relates to teacher licensing. And this is due to the teacher and staff supply challenges that are made worse by the pandemic. So I don't, again, know how that's impacting Greendale at this point. But I know that they're trying to get more teachers activated back in the force. So and that's what I've got for you tonight.
All right, thanks, Kathy. Any board committee report updates? Anything from the Education Foundation or the Park and Rec?
Sure. I'll give an update from Park and Rec on just some happenings that's going on. Jackie and her team are working very hard. So the Park and Rec began their indoor recreation opportunities the week of October 12th. So they're in their 3rd week right now. Another big thing that just opened up is the Greendale Senior Social Club program, and they opened up with a limited number of people starting on October 20th. And then Jackie kind of reported that the first couple of days they had about 11, 12 people who attended on different time slots. And then this week begins the first after-school activities. Unfortunately, there were several activities that had to be canceled due to low enrollment, but there are several still running.
Again, glad to see that things are returning to some level of normalcy. Anything else?
There was a Greendale Education Foundation meeting on September 24th in which a series of grants were approved. So there was a grant for Everybody Rides for $3,700 that was approved for Greendale High School Robotics of $3,000 grant. And then a personal sensory bins for the classrooms of $250. And then a Shop with the Cop collaboration with Greendale Police Department for $500 as well. So there's some things that we're thinking through and connecting, but one of the pieces that we talked about also was the kind of aligning with the strategic plan priorities and then rallying around that from the Education Foundation to look at, raising funds to support specific areas of need. So more to come on that.
Excellent.
I just had a couple things with WASB. You've probably received that there was in-services that they're offering. It does appear that there are several that are during the workday, so I'm not sure how that would impact us, but I think Mary Ann sent something out, or it was in the DU. So if you're interested, there's some classes there. But the one thing I wanted to point out is that this year's state convention is going to be an e-convention or an e-conference, and registration opens on November 1st for that. So it's January 20th through the 22nd, and that's about it. So, yep.
All right, thanks, Kathy. Calendar reviews, I've been jotting down a couple of things. I know later this week, the Greendale Park and Recreation and Gift of Wings are doing their Halloween's pumpkin carving at the gazebo starting on the 27th through November 1st. So that's happening in the village. And then the Greendale High School play, the Laramie Project, is being performed. It's being performed either streamed or video on demand. And that's happening that first week in November 6th through the 8th. Anything else that is happening within the schools of the village?
Are they still doing the catapult of the pumpkins?
I saw that the other day.
I think that happened already.
Did it happen? I thought it was on the 1st of
Okay.
November.
All right, then it might be on the 1st.
Okay. So they're going to be, you can bring your pumpkins over.
I've been wanting to do the pumpkin trebuchet launch for
Yeah. I was supposed to
decade.
I was supposed to run a class with students to build it, and then we only had, at the end of it, we only had two, I think, students that were still signed up, so we decided to punt, and they brought in something from Ohio that they're going to launch pumpkins with.
I saw something that the Gift of Wings posted on their social media about that happening.
So did they mention any steps they're taking for this event that's coming up? And I know there's also trick or treat this weekend as far as safety measures with COVID, because that, to me, that's a concern that we're still having events in the village right now.
And those are events that we don't have
control over.
Input on. If you'd like input, then the village board does meet and address those things. So what we will be doing in the schools is continuing to enforce wearing your mask, watching your distance, and washing your hands. And what we know is that is controlling, and it is controlling the spread, and that the health department has reported that they are not seeing spread happening within our schools.
All right, very good. We're at the end of the agenda. Seeing no additional comments from visitors, we are adjourned. We are meeting next week, Monday. So because this is the fourth Monday of October, we'll be meeting next week, Monday, on November 2nd at 7 p.m. We are adjourned.
Thank you.